Alright, so in this video we're going to go through the detail of calculating the individual cost variances. But before we get there, I just want to highlight this table over here to give you an understanding of really what we're going to do when we're calculating the variances. So if we think of any cost, it's typically the price that you would pay. So if I take any cost, if I take any manufacturing cost, if I take direct material, it costs me a certain price per kilogram, liter, etc. And I buy a certain quantity of that kilogram, or a certain quantity, and so it's that price multiplied with that quantity that gives me a total. So if we really think about it, we may get variances due to price. So in other words, the price we pay for something, the price we actually pay for something may differ to the price we thought we were going to pay, which is our budget. So the difference between the budgeted price, which is known as the standard, and the price that we actually pay would be a variance, known as the price variance. And then as well as quantity, there could be a difference due to quantity. In other words, the quantity that we actually ended up using or purchasing, quantity which we actually end up using versus the quantity which we budgeted to use. And so there could be a variance based on quantity. So the method that we like to use, in textbooks there's lots of formulas. I'm not a fan of studying formulas, so there is what is known as a table method that has been developed. And basically just I want to explain to you at a high level what the table method entails, and in the next video we're going to go through an example about really using the table method. So first things first is that the table method basically it's as columns. If you fill in a certain amount of columns, the difference between a few columns will give you the respective variances. Alright, so but first thing I wanted to highlight is direct material. So direct material, you can get a price variance due to the difference in price that you pay for the material, and you can get a volume variance or quantity variance due to the difference in volume from what you expected and what actually happens. Direct labor, you can get a price variance due to the price you pay per hour for the laborers versus what you budgeted you're going to pay, and you can get a quantity variance due to the actual number of hours that the workers actually work versus what you budgeted they would work. That's the quantity variance. Variable overheads, similar. Only difference, variable overheads, remember it's the indirect cost. Variable and fixed overheads is indirect, so we first have to figure out how does the company allocate overheads, and then again it's the difference between the actual price per overhead between budget or actual, which will give you the price variance, the difference in the quantity. So if the company says they allocate overheads based on labor hours, etc., will be the difference in labor hours from what you expect and what actually happens. And then lastly, the flex budget, which again is similar between price and quantity. So now I just want to explain the headings. So the headings of this table is actually, for now you can take out the original budget column. I'm just going to take it out for now so it's not confuse you. So firstly, the easiest way to do this table is to do it from right to left. Okay, so the last column is known as the actual cost column. In other words, that is your actual price that you pay multiplied by the actual quantity that you purchase. Alright, so this column is a column that you would fill in a question. That will give you would have to identify what is the actual price multiplied by the actual quantity. Then you skip this column and you go to this column, because this column would be the actual quantity, but we multiply that by the standard price, because effectively the difference between this column and that column should just be price. Both uses actual quantity there, actual quantity there. However, the difference is here we use the standard price and there we use the actual price. So the difference between these two columns is the price variance. In other words, if I were to get an answer of 100 there, 80 there, the difference here would be 20, and then it's a case of, okay, well, 80 is less than 100, so my actual cost is lower than what I thought it would be, so that would be a favorable variance because you want a lower cost, so that would be a favorable variance. But once this is filled in and that is filled in, this is just merely the difference. Alright, then then I just want to explain I'll leave that there for now and explain the flex budget. The flex budget is the quantity, how much we expect to, is essentially the standard price for 1 unit, right? And we multiply this by the actual units produced. That should be standard price. So what I'm saying here, if we're dealing with my direct material, we would say what is the standard price for direct material for 1 unit? And then we multiply that by the actual amount of units we actually produce. Similar to this example that we just did here in the previous video, where we said flex in the budget. Well, what would be the standard price for 0.1 kilograms of pen, and let's say it costs 1 rand or 10 rand per pen. Sorry, 10 rand per kilogram. It would be 10 rand multiplied by 0.1 kilograms, which would mean it would be 1 rand, and then we say the 1 rand multiplied by the actual amount of pens. That will give us our flex budget. So it is standard price of 1 unit multiplied by actual units produced. So everything in this column will be standard price for 1 unit multiplied by the actual units produced. The only difference is for labor it will be the standard price of labor for 1 unit. For variable overheads it will be the standard price for variable overheads for your 1 unit, and fixed overheads will be the standard price of fixed overheads for 1 unit. But each of the items in this column will be multiplied by actual units produced. Alright, so that is really sort of at a high level explanation for this table, and then the difference between this column and that column will give you your quantity variance. Then the only exception that I wanted to highlight is the fixed overheads. So fixed overheads, this column changes a bit, is that this middle column becomes the original budget, which is just basically what you originally budgeted multiplied by, in terms of units, multiplied by the original budget in terms of the price per unit. And that's because a budget is not influenced, should not be, fixed cost is not driven by an increase in production. So therefore we don't change this column based on actual quantity. We keep it at the original budget. Alright, so, and then again, the difference between this column and that column would be the price variance, except we just don't call it the price variance of fixed overheads, we call it the expenditure variance, but it's effectively similar to a price variance, and the difference between these two columns would also again just be the quantity variance. Alright, so that is just at a high level explaining how the table works. When we come back, we'll do an example of the table. And I think after you do the example, things will be hopefully a bit more clearer. Okay, check back soon. Cheers, bye.